Dominant offensive line play has been one of the hallmarks of the Kirby Smart era, and this year figures to be no different as the Dogs are poised to once again feature one of the best offensive lines in all the land. But just because Georgia's offensive line is very talented and very deep doesn't mean there aren't still some questions to answer. It doesn't mean that there aren't still a few position battles to watch. So today, I've got you covered with everything you need to know about the Georgia offensive line heading into the 2024 season.
We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? I'm Tyler, and this is Glory UGA Plus, where I bring you a small sample of what we got for you on the Glory UGA podcast. This video is brought to you by our great friends at Alumni Hall, and this channel is your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about the Georgia Bulldogs heading into the 2024 season. I'm in the midst of previewing every single position unit on the team. I think this is the fourth installment in this series I'm running, a daily series I'm running. Had to skip yesterday, but we're back on it today. So if you are a diehard Georgia fan, you're not going to miss out. Go ahead and subscribe right now so you can get fully ready for the start of fall camp, which is Thursday, August 1st, just around the corner. Like the video if you enjoy it, comment, let me know what you guys think. All of the above, that's all greatly appreciated as I continue to try to get this new YouTube channel off the ground. All right, let's get after it today, guys. And let's just start with the bookends. There's a couple different ways you go about this, but let's start with the tackles. And let's open with the left tackle position, where we have a returning incumbent starter, Ernest Green, who is coming back for presumptively his second year as a starter for Georgia at the left tackle position. Last year as a redshirt freshman was his first year starting, and it was a really strong first year for Ernest Green, who did earn all SEC freshman honors a year ago. He started from the jump last year, all 14 games. He's a big dude with good athleticism, good feet, 6'4", 320, and honestly had a really, really good year for a guy starting for the first time, and really a guy getting his first meaningful reps at all. Let's not forget, as a true freshman in 2022, he was doing some good things when he arrived to campus and kind of making a little bit of a name for himself, but he was dealing with a back injury at the latter stages of fall camp in the early parts of the season. It actually had to undergo back surgery as a true freshman, and that's tough, guys. When you're a true freshman, yes, very talented, but you need those reps for development, and he missed all that. So I think Ernest Green was really impressive last year as a first-year starter, considering that he didn't really get many reps at all once we got into the 2022 season. Now, there were some bumps in the road. He took his lumps early the first couple games of the year. I wasn't particularly great. We talked about that here on the Glory UGA podcast, which, by the way, you can check out wherever you get your podcasts for a lot more content just like this. And I was open in my criticism of some of the things I saw from Ernest Green in the first couple games. But hey, man, he's a true freshman. You have to kind of, or he was a redshirt freshman starting for the first time last year. So you kind of have to expect there to be some sort of adjustment period, again, especially with him coming off that back injury. But I do want to give Ernest Green credit. As the season progressed, he did what you would want him to do. He got better. He progressed. He corrected some of the mistakes you would see him making early in the year, which were, he's not playing with great leverage, getting overextended, getting off balance, not exactly always knowing who to block and kind of just hesitating and guessing out there. Those things you saw him do early in the year, which are not all that unusual for a first-year starter, for a young guy like Ernest Green. You saw him improve in those areas as the season progressed. By the end of the year, he was playing at a very, very high level, and I fully expect him to continue that momentum into this 2024 season, which, guys, Ernest Green is actually a third-year guy. Very talented guy, former top 50 level recruit coming out of high school from the state of California. If he has a good year, if he takes the kind of jump, which I think he can make in year two as a starter, especially now with a full year behind him, not having to deal with the back injury the year before, if he takes the kind of step I think he could take, this guy could declare early for the NFL draft after this season. Now, he's got to go out and perform. He's got to go out and do it. He's got to improve. He's got to take some steps. But I think the potential, the athleticism, the ceiling is there. He's just got to go out there and do it. But I think he's really firmly entrenched as the starter at left tackle. I really have no questions there. Now, the other names to maybe watch to back him up behind him there's a couple guys I would watch. One guy that the coaches like is a redshirt freshman himself this year is a guy named Jamal Merriweather. Now, he hasn't played really at all outside of like garbage time. So, the average Georgia fan probably not fully aware of this guy unless you're one of those people like me who's just a Georgia football junkie and a recruiting junkie, and you follow these things. But this is a big dude. 6'6", only 290. That's the thing with Jamal Merriweather. He's got a great frame, but he just got to fill it out. That's what he had to do come into last year, and he's in the process of doing that. But everything I've been hearing coming out of practice for a while now is the coaches are very high on what Jamal Merriweather can be down the road. Now, will that be this year? Probably not. He's probably not going to have those opportunities, but God forbid if there's injuries. We see it every single year on the offensive line. He's a guy that you would have to watch as a potential option to come in there and play in place of Ernest Green. Another guy to watch is a guy that we're talking about next year. We get to the right tackles a little bit more. Monroe Freeling, who is also a redshirt freshman along with Jamal Merriweather. Got a little more time last year than Merriweather did. Played some actual meaningful snaps at times as the year progressed, certainly with Marius Mims going down. He's a guy that could play either tackle position. Right now, he's figuring more prominently into the right tackle battle. At least that was what we were seeing during spring practice. I imagine that would be the case coming to fall camp. But, I mean, he's a guy that I do think has the ability, the length, the athleticism, the footwork to play either tackle. Not every right tackle can play left tackle. I think Monroe Freeling can play left tackle long term. So he's another guy, if pressed to duty, could play left tackle. And who knows, maybe it'll be some sort of rotation of sorts. Which now brings us to the other bookend. Let's talk about the right tackle. Now, this is a battle. I think left tackle, pretty cut and dry, barring injury, knock on wood. It's going to be Ernest Green. Right tackle, not as clear-cut. I do think there's a leader, but there's also an opening, more of a chance for another guy to come in and maybe push for a starting job. So right now we have really a two-man battle, it seems like, at right tackle coming into fall camp. It's sixth-year senior Xavier Truss, who has been a multi-year starter for Georgia, not always at tackle, but that's where he figures to slot in this year. And as I just mentioned, rising sophomore, actually, Monroe Freeling, not a redshirt freshman, he's a rising sophomore. Rising sophomore Monroe Freeling, let me correct myself there. Those are the two really locked in a battle for that right tackle spot. It's an interesting situation here. I mean, it's not unusual. You have a guy who's a veteran, who's played a lot of football for Georgia, again, going to his sixth year in Xavier Truss, started at guard, started at tackle, been around for a long time. And this dude is back in like the 2019 class. Been a long, long time that Xavier Truss has been at Georgia. But as good as Truss has been, he's been a really good, solid player for Georgia and a lot of good things for us. I think Monroe Freeling, long-term, has the higher ceiling. I think he's a better athlete. I think he has better footwork. I think he has better length. He's not as big and strong as Xavier Truss right now, which is part of the issue and part of the reason why I think Xavier Truss has to be the favorite to start at right tackle coming into the year. He's just a bigger dude, stronger dude, been around for a long time, been in a college weight program for a longer period of time. Monroe Freeling, a lot like Jamal Merriweather, coming into high school or coming to college, was a highly rated guy. He was much more highly rated than Jamal Merriweather. He's like a fringe five-star guy on most recruiting services. At times was a five-star guy. He has the frame, big, tall kid, but he needed to fill that frame out. Needed some time in the weight room to get bigger, to get stronger, all those things, add bulk. And to his credit, he's done a lot of that, but he still has some room to improve there. Physically, he's just not quite there yet at the level of Xavier Truss. And obviously, Truss has more experience in the offense, more trust built up with the coaching staff, more proof of concept with Xavier Truss. But as I've often said throughout the course of the offseason, best case scenario for Georgia, and this is no slight on Xavier Truss, is that Monroe Freeling is a lot closer to reaching his ceiling. Because if Freeling can start to get close to that ceiling, his ceiling is just higher than Xavier Truss. And that's no slight on Truss. I don't intend it to be that way. Truss has done a lot of good things for Georgia. And if he ends up starting at right tackle, hey, I'm okay with that. He did most of last year anyway, guys, and our offensive line was still really, really good. I mean, let's not forget that Marius Mims went down with an ankle sprain the third week of the season and was out for most of the rest of the thing. With the Ole Miss game, he actually came back and he still wasn't playing full time, and he comes out of the SEC championship game early in that game. So we saw last year Xavier Truss move from left guard, which was where he opened the season as a starter, moved to right tackle. He has that positional versatility, and he played very, very well. Now, the issue with Truss at times is like, in my estimation, I think he can play either spot, tackle or guard. He's got that versatility. I think he's more of like a true guard. I think that's what he is. I'm not saying he has bad athleticism or bad footwork. He's a good athlete. He's just not an elite athlete. He's not a plus athlete out there. So he's not as effective against some of the more dynamic speed rushers that you might have to face if you want to go do the things that Georgia wants to do and actually win championships. He's good. He's good enough to handle, plenty good enough to be a great tackle option for us against most teams. But when you play, the Tennessees of the world, you got James Pierce Jr. to deal with. When you play like Alabama last year in the SEC Championship game, you got Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell. Well, those are guys he has a harder time against. He's not as effective with those guys. He's just not as quick as them. I think he's more of a guard, being last year forced to play tackle more out of necessity. But this year, he is the guy with more experience. So if I had to bet right now, I would bet on Xavier Truss being the guy to open the season at right tackle. But I do believe that Monroe Freeling is too good to keep off the field. I expect there to be some sort of rotation there. It might just be a rotation at right tackle between Truss and Freeling, or it might be a three-man rotation. We saw that times last year when Amarius Mims came back. And we've seen that in previous years, like with Warren McClendon, Amarius Mims. We've seen that at Georgia, left tackle and right tackle, like a three-man rotation going back and forth. And that could be in the cards this year. We'll just have to see how all these guys progress during fall camp. And really, a lot of it depends on Monroe Freeling. It's in Monroe Freeling's hands right now. If this guy takes a step, I believe he can. He's just a more talented guy. He's just got to get bigger and stronger and get better fundamentally, get more accustomed to the system, all those things. So if he takes those strides, he could earn some serious playing time this year. We'll just have to see what he's able to do during fall camp. But again, if I had to bet, at least coming into the season, I would go with Xavier Truss at right tackle with Monroe Freeling being the backup option. I think a rotational guy at tackle. All right, let's go to the interior here. Let's start at left guard. We'll go to right guard. We'll go to center. At left guard, it's not super clear cut because there's not much separation between the two guys that are vying to be the starter at left guard. It's the same two guys it was last year after game 3 when the Amarius Mims went down and we had to slide Truss over to right tackle from that left guard spot. It's Dylan Fairchild. It's Micah Morris. One of those two guys is going to be your starter at left guard. Last year, it was Fairchild. Once Mims went down, we had to slide Truss out to tackle. He had 10 starts last year. And, like Ernest Green, he wasn't as young as Ernest Green, not as inexperienced as Ernest Green, but he took some time to really kind of get into rhythm and get comfortable there. He's a guy that's been in our system for a little while, but he hadn't played a ton of meaningful snaps. That had to change real quick last year against South Carolina in week 3. And there were some bumps in the road. Like against Auburn, he had a really, really tough game. But he bounced back, and the rest of the year, he just got better and better. By the end of the year, man, that dude was killing people. He was a road grader out there doing a lot of really good things. A nasty guy, some of that old school nastiness in his game. So you like that. So he's definitely an option there. But let's not sell Micah Morris short. This is a guy early in spring practice, the first week or so, reports where he was actually starting ahead of Dylan Fairchild at that left guard spot. And starting that's a strong word. We were talking about at practice, but he was working with the number ones early in spring practice. Now, when we got to G-Day, it was Dylan Fairchild who started with the number one offense, like for whatever that's worth. But guys, bottom line is it doesn't really altogether matter who starts. That's more just an ego thing. I'm the starter. You like to be able to say that. They're both going to play. They're both going to play a lot. I imagine their snap count will be split fairly equally. It would not shock me at all to see like a series-by-series rotation with those guys because they're both really good. And you want both those guys on your roster. And if one of them doesn't play, well, in this era, we know what's going to happen. They're in the transfer portal. They're gone, right? So you got to play these guys if they deserve to play. And both guys deserve to play. And we'll see what happens once we get to spring practice or once we get to fall camp and who actually rises to the top and ends up starting week 1 against Clemson. And that could change week by week based on performance. Again, there's very little separation, if any at all, between those two guys. And we'll see who has a better fall camp and opens as a starter at left guard, but it will be Fairchild or Morris. At right guard, very clear cut, 0 questions as to who the starter is there. The most entrenched player on the offensive line has got to be Tate Ratledge at right guard, going into his 3rd year as a starter at right guard. Really, technically, this is now the 4th year in a row that he has earned a starting job at right guard, because let's not forget, week 1 against Clemson back in 2021. Yeah, he's been around that long. He opened the season as a starter right guard. There were reports coming out of fall camp. This dude was the best offensive lineman on the team, but unfortunately for Tate, unfortunately for us, he ends up suffering a foot injury very early in that first game against Clemson, a Liz Frank injury, missed the rest of the year, struggled to get back the following year, was able to come back, took some time to get ready. But last year, he was much better. He was fully healthy, didn't have to deal with the recovery, anything like that. And this year, I fully expect Tate Ratledge to take the SEC by storm at right guard. I've been very high on this guy for a long time, and now that he's fully healthy and he's got a couple years under his belt of being healthy, this guy is in line for a monster final year in Athens. I think he's a probable preseason first-team All-American at right guard. I mean, there's no guarantee there. I think that's certainly a strong possibility. So he's the guy there. Zero questions asked. Now, the top backup to Ratledge, I think, is just whoever doesn't win the left guard job. Like, whoever doesn't win that left guard starting job, whether it's Micah Morris or whether it's Dylan Fairchild, like, they're going to be the third guard. So when you need a guard to sub in, whether that's at the left guard or right guard spot, it's going to be either Fairchild or Morris, whoever doesn't win that job. They can play left guard, they can play right guard, almost interchangeable there. So that's how that's going to shake out. Now, there's one sleeper. My sleeper on the entire offensive line to watch this fall camp is a new guy, a young guy who, if you follow Georgia football closely, which I know if you're watching this video, you definitely do, is a guy that you probably heard a little bit about during fall camp, and that's big true freshman Daniel Calhoun out of Walton High School here in the great state of Georgia. Massive dude, 6'6", 350. And this is a guy, I mean, he could play tackle, could play guard. During the spring, he was playing guard primarily and was actually getting pretty rave reviews coming out of spring practice, which, hey, like when you talk about true freshmen in the trenches, I rarely expect anything from those guys. And I think that's the toughest spot to come in and play right away, because you were going against grown men on the other side. You're like 18 years old. Yeah, you're big and strong. You were dominating everybody back in high school. But now you're going against like 21, 22-year-old grown men in the SEC. And oftentimes you ain't quite ready for that. Well, Daniel Calhoun is 6'6", 350. That's not as much of a problem. The physicality is not as much of an issue for him. It's more of just, hey, we got to learn technique. We got to learn the offense, learn what to do. But from all accounts, he had a really, really strong spring, was working with the number 2 offense during G-Day, looked really good in that one isolated setting, for whatever that's worth. But he looked good in that one isolated setting that we got to see him in. So I'm not saying that he's going to play like significant snaps. I'm not saying that Calhoun's going to be in a rotation. But I'm also saying, like, it's not impossible. Watch out for that guy. He is a sleeper. Let's see what he can do. Can he build on the positive things that he did during the spring, carry it over to fall camp? If that's the case, man, like Kirby has shown, he'll play you at a young age if you are deserving of it. If you are ready to play, if you show you can help the team, he'll play you. And it wouldn't shock me. I'm not predicting it right now, but it certainly wouldn't shock me. So I'm calling Daniel Calhoun my sleeper on the offensive line. At center, another, I think, pretty clear-cut guy, at least in terms of the starting job, it's Jared Wilson. Honestly, it's Jared Wilson 100% for the first time in a while. Cedric Van Pran Granger is not going to be a Georgia Bulldog, that's unfortunate, man. There's a great leader for our team, a great ambassador, a great representative of the University of Georgia, but he is now gone off to the NFL. And Jared Wilson, who's been around for a little while now, is sliding into that starting spot. He's a junior now, all right? Now, guys, I've said this before, but if some of you are new to the Glory UGA podcast, you're finding me for the first time, finding this podcast for the first time, let me just reiterate this for everybody. I love Jared Wilson. I think this guy is a star in the making at the center position. I know we all love SVP. We love the guy. I love the guy, man. This is not me trying to rip on him whatsoever. He did a lot of great things for Georgia, great ambassador, great player. But physically speaking, Jared Wilson is a better prospect, right? He has a higher ceiling than Cedric Van Pran. Cedric was really good, but he wasn't a dominant physical guy. There were times, he had trouble staying on his feet, had trouble getting to the second level at times. And I'm not saying that Jared Wilson won't struggle in that regard at times too, but if you watch this guy, I know again, garbage time for the most part last year, but when he got opportunities, man, I know people are typically watching center. I'm that weirdo, that junkie who does these things, goes back and watches all the tape with a fine-tooth comb during the offseason, and I zeroed in on Jared Wilson. Dude's unbelievable, man. As an athlete, this guy's off the charts as an athlete. I mean, athletically speaking, Love said, Jared Wilson's a different level. He's a different kind of guy. So physically, I think he's probably a step up from Cedric Van Pran. That's saying a lot because Cedric was really good. And I know you're saying, oh man, you should be in a homer, dude. Like you lose this guy, you think it's just going to be the next guy's going to be even better? I mean, maybe, actually, probably in this case. I mean, just listen to Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart's raved about this guy. I don't want to butcher the quote, but he's been quoted as saying essentially, I can't wait for the world to see Jared Wilson. Kirby Smart said that. He doesn't talk about guys like that, especially guys who haven't really played significant down. So I'm very high on Jared Wilson. I think he's going to be really, really good. I think he's an all-SEC caliber player at center. We'll see how he does in his first year. There are some concerns. He hasn't had the experience. He doesn't maybe have the leadership qualities at this point that Cedric Van Pran did. I think Ced certainly had an edge there. But physically, I think Jared Wilson's going to be really good for Georgia. Now, behind him, I think right now you can look at Drew Bobo probably as the primary backup to Jared Wilson. Malachi Tolliver as a true freshman. One of these guys in this epically incredible Georgia offensive line class in 2024. He's a guy that was working some at the center position during the spring, so he'll probably be there in that conversation as well. But right now, Drew Bobo has been in the system for a little bit longer, and I expect him to be that top backup at center. Hopefully, we don't need him because I think Jared Wilson's going to be awesome, but I will look for Bobo to be that top backup. So look, guys, let's summarize this. This offensive line, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people are talking about it. Most people are talking about it as one of the best offensive lines in the country. I've certainly been saying that all offseason. So, yeah, I believe this offensive line will absolutely be as good as advertised. Where I will stop, though, I'll stop short of calling it the best offensive line in the Kirby Smart era. I've heard some people say, man, this is going to be the best offensive line Georgia's ever had under Kirby Smart. Maybe. I can't sit here and say, like, definitively, no, it's not going to be. But we've had some really good offensive lines. But let's not be a prisoner of the moment. Let's not fall victim to recency bias here. I mean, let's go back to like 2019. We got Andrew Thomas, Isaiah Wilson, right? Bookend tackles was both first round guys. No, Isaiah Wilson flamed out in the NFL. That wasn't because of talent. That was because things going on in the head. You got those two first round guys at tackle. You got Ben Cleveland, who was drafted in the NFL, Lamont Galliard, who was really good for Georgia at center. Solomon McKinley got drafted, starting for a while for the Dolphins, I believe. Jamari Salyer, now starting in the NFL, was on that offensive line as well, playing a role as well. So, 2019, now if this Georgia offensive line ends up being better than that offensive line, I don't see any world that we don't win the national championship. I mean, that's just because we're talking about an epic offensive line. I think we're going to be really, really good. I would stop short of saying 2019 level because I don't know if we have two first-round guys at tackle right now. I mean, I don't think Xavier Truss will be a first round. I know he's not going to be a first-round guy. We'll probably get drafted first round. No. Ernest Green, could he be a first-round guy? Yeah, with a good year, with a really good year. I think he's got that potential, but he's got to go out there and earn it. He's got to show it. But we just don't have Andrew Thomas, Isaiah Wilson, surefire first-round guys. And Jamari Salyer, who wasn't going to be a first-round guy based on measurables, but he was just an incredible offensive lineman, and you knew he was going to be good in the NFL, which is exactly what he's been. Ben Cleveland, Solomon McKinley. I think the interior of our offensive line is really, really good. But the tackle position right now, that's where I kind of stop short. Because, the interior, I will say, I feel comfortable saying this is probably going to be the best interior offensive line in the Smart era. When you throw in a guy like Tate Ratledge, who very well could be a first-team All-American type guy, you throw in the combination of Fairchild and Morris at the other guard position. And I think Jared Wilson is going to be awesome this year. The interior of the offensive line, yeah, that might very well be the best interior O-line in the Smart era. But the tackles, that's where I have some questions. That's kind of what makes me stop short of saying, yeah, this is going to be the best offensive line in Georgia history. But hey, you know what? Even though it might not end up being the the offensive line in the Kirby Smart era, I think it has the potential to at least be in the conversation, to be in the same ballpark. And that's, if you're in the ballpark of that 2019 offensive line, I think you're in really, really good shape. So look, man, we have some, my biggest question here has got to be, again, the tackle position, right? Making that clear. Interior, we're going to be good. Tackle, I think we're good. I think we're really good. But if there's a vulnerability in the Georgia offensive line, if there are some questions, it's a tackle, right? Will we see Ernest Green take that big step in his second year as a starter? I'm hopeful. I think there's a really good chance, but we don't know that yet. Will we see Monroe Freeling take that step and surpass Xavier Truss? Maybe, but we don't know that yet. Will Xavier Truss get better? Because, think about the schedule, guys. We all know the brutal schedule Georgia has to face this year. And there are some elite speed rushers on that schedule we're going to have to face. The Tennessee, James Pierce Jr. That guy is an elite edge rusher, speed rusher. Trey Moore, Anthony Hill Jr. at Texas. And then you go to Ole Miss, Princely Umanmielen. And you get in the college football playoff, you're going to probably have some other great speed rushers to face. Whether it's Ohio State, whoever it might be. If we want to accomplish all of our goals as a team, we're going to face some teams like that have elite speed rushers off the edge. And we saw Truss struggle at times with those kinds of guys in pass pro, especially when we got in third and one situations where it's an obvious passing situation, which you don't want to be in those situations, but sometimes you are. And he struggled in those situations. So that's my question. Are we elite at tackle? We are elite on the interior. I think we're good to really good at tackle. But for this offensive line to be the best offensive line in the Kirby Smart era, those tackles got to show me they're elite. And I haven't quite seen that yet. The potential's there. We just have not seen it yet. So I think that's the question. Because if we can give Carson Beck a clean pocket to work with, Carson Beck will dice everyone we play up. The issue for Carson is if you force him off that spot and he now has to be a creator outside the pocket, that's not really his forte. So it's critical that our tackles are able to block the best speed rushers that we're going to face all year. We're going to have to beat those teams. We're going to have to beat Texas. We're going to have to beat Tennessee. We're going to have to beat Ole Miss. We're going to have to win games in the college football playoff. So they've got to be able to give Carson time off the edge, which is against Alabama last year in the SEC championship game, especially on David Truss's side, was an issue at times. So I want to see that improvement, but that's really the only big question I have. And it's not even really a big question. You're kind of like grasping at straws here, trying to poke holes in the Georgia offensive line, because the reality is this offensive line, once again, will be one of the best offensive lines in the entire country. But all right, guys, I appreciate you checking out this episode. Again, I am in the midst of a series previewing every single position unit on the team. I've done receivers, I've done running backs, I did tight ends, and now we've done the offensive line. We got one more spot on the offense, which is quarterbacks, then we'll turn our attention to the defense side of the ball. So, hey, man, if you enjoy some hardcore Georgia football talk, if you're a diehard Georgia fan, and you want to get ready for this upcoming 2024 season, and you want to get to speed with everything you need to know about this team heading to fall camp, which opens next week, subscribe right now. You don't want to miss any of this content. I don't think you're going to find content like this anywhere else. Maybe I'm biased, but I like to think that we cover Georgia football in a little bit of a different way here on the Glory UGA podcast. And if you like this content, make sure check out the Glory UGA podcast, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast for a heck of a lot more content just like this. But I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for being here, tuning in today. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs.
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.